Okay, we're back for just a little bit more. All right, Trevor, what else do you have to share?
Well, I didn't get to mention one component of looking forward that I thought might be relevant is how I mentioned we have hardware in our brains that allow us to do certain things, certain tasks, like language. Um, we have specialized hardware for our senses too. And so we have five senses we rely on: sight, hearing, sound, smell, taste. And an open question that I wonder that is an extension of the question of intelligence is what if we're missing some critical organ to do some sensing for something that we're not able to perceive on an ordinary basis?
Hmm.
And then how could we really say we're performing when we're walking around blind to some sixth sense all the time?
I had heard once, like AI can maybe predict into the future because it can take all this information that we don't necessarily understand yet, and it can project something that we haven't thought about yet, which is kind of like what you're saying. And I've heard it in terms of like medicine, right? In the medicine space, like it can take all this different information and come up with something that perhaps the medical field hasn't even thought about yet. It can predict
Right.
something in the future that we haven't thought about yet. Maybe that's what you're saying with the senses. Like we only know all right, let's get philosophical here. We only know our reality based on our reality. But AI
Based
can
on our
push
perception.
perception of reality, but AI can push us into a new reality. Does that make any
Because it
sense?
can observe things that we cannot perceive.
Exactly, on a larger scale, on a broader.
Right. And you're talking about patterns and seeing into the future, but I mean
Yeah.
something even more visceral than that.
Okay, what?
Um, well, the human eye can only see a very narrow band of frequencies. We
Okay.
call that the visible light spectrum. But we can build instruments that can receive other wavelengths. And so, what if we could build sensors that are powered by artificial intelligence that could perceive things about the universe that we can't see with our eyes?
Wow.
Now, you're talking about prediction making. In the medical field, anomaly detection is very valuable. And a doctor can do that. A doctor could probably look at data and tell you, well, this is an outlier. This is not normal.
Hmm.
AI can do that like turbocharged
Wow.
because the way that the mathematical models work is one example is principal component analysis, where you take key data components and you assign them a meaning. So one would be like BMI. You've got height and weight. And so we draw a line with BMI and say, well, if you fall outside of this range, then this is outside of what's normal or standard. But then everyone's an individual. So BMI doesn't really work for different cultures because a certain race of people might tend to one side of the scale.
Hmm.
But with AI, we can apply very sophisticated math that we don't have to go into to observe just huge amounts of data with a lot of different indicators of what's going on. And it'll extract all the information from each component of a total large amount of data. That's a very cool application.
Hmm.
It's something that humans have a hard time doing. We can do it. If you take a professional in their field and you throw them into a convoluted situation and say, make sense of this mess, a person can do it. But we are building machines that can do that too.
Hmm.
It's so cool.
Okay, here's the question.
I,
Go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
Okay.
No, no, no. You're probably on topic.
Where do you see us in 10 years? Like I just create just based on you have so much knowledge, you're in the field, you're smart, just and you can even be like a bit whimsical with it, fun with it. Like where do you see all this? Or where do you
I'd rather be practical and say,
okay.
and I've heard other tech experts say this because I don't work in artificial intelligence or machine learning, But the people who do are saying that there are measurable constructs that are exploding right now. One good example is what's called the context window. And this applies to this conversation because how long can I talk before we start to lose the thread? Because I can take a lot of information and just throw it at you. But at a certain point, we just can't carry a conversation because I'm trying to fit a large topic into a small time scale.
Okay.
And that's the context window. And the context window that artificial agents are able to understand all at once, simultaneously, has expanded from 10,000 tokens or 10,000 letters to 100,000 letters, a million letters. And so now, how fast can you read Harry Potter? If you can read the entire series in a split second, or maybe, 30 seconds, you can keep up with an AI model. And
Wow.
if you can't read a couple books a minute, then you can't keep up with artificial intelligence. In 10 years, we are doubling. Let's see, Moore's law states that the number of transistors you can fit into a certain size footprint package doubles every 7 years. We have hit the physical limitation of Moore's law. We can no longer build computers that double in density every 7 years. So we're making improvements in other fields. For AI, we are doubling the capability of AI in a matter of months.
I feel
So
like
it's impossible to say where we'll be in 10 years.
I feel like the way you've described it is like we can't keep up. How are we going to keep up?
Exactly.
We're going to have to let
Um,
some things go. Like, think about how I learned using typewriter, right? We don't use typewriters anymore. We're, typing on our keyboards or
well, how fast
maybe
can you
we'll
type on a
lose.
typewriter?
Well, I mean, definitely not as fast as probably some of the younger, but my point is like the tools I grew up with, like using a pencil. Like I don't even think, do we even use a pencil anymore? Like I just think that we're gonna have to shed some of the tools that we use to adapt to the new tools.
That's a really interesting thought. Maybe the cap maybe we're intellectually outgrowing the capacity of the tools that we use.
Hmm.
Um, I don't usually take notes with pencil. Now, people say that you absorb information better when you're writing it.
Hmm.
And I think that that's because the information is moving through the processing part of the brain to the expression part of the brain. So you're spending more time with it. But I say, how fast can you type with a typewriter? How many words a minute can you write? Because there are real limitations to that.
Hmm.
If you type too fast on a typewriter, it'll get jammed.
Hmm.
If you write too fast with a pencil, it'll break or your hand will cramp.
Like a couple toes and true. So here's an interesting thought. Okay, we haven't even gotten into academics, but like I just finished my PhD, right? 5 years, no AI. If we use AI, it was considered plagiarism. We would fail. All original writing, all original thought. Now, did I use dictionary type app for spelling, words or grammar, things like that? Yes, but everything I wrote was original. Okay. The process of writing a dissertation is part of the requirement of getting a PhD. You have to be able to like formulate a study, an idea, run a study, write about it, analyze the data, write about it. I just don't understand how the academic world is going to keep up with AI because how are you going to keep people from using it? And it's more efficient to use AI. So it goes back to your original like models of intelligence. It's changing all the models. It's changing all the models and all the spaces that we work in. And it will be really interesting to see what it does in the academic space, especially with PhDs. When you go for your PhD, it will be interesting to see what the guidelines they tell you, like what you can use, what you can't use, um, because they're gonna have to adapt in some way, you know? It's
I love this line of thinking.
right because the let me see how to say this. And this is really pushing my brain, people, but like to become a faster runner, you have to run fast. Perhaps you go to a track, perhaps you do tempo runs. Whatever you do, you got to do some speed work to get faster. You got to go on some long runs and some speed work, right? To become a faster runner, okay? To get a PhD, as far as the experience I had, you have to do certain things on your own. You have to show that you're doing this original thinking. So I don't know how they're going to handle this, this interconnection of these two worlds, human intelligence, artificial intelligence. Be really interesting to see.
Based on your experience, tell me if I'm right. I believe that when you're training, you need to run into your limit. You need to get exhausted to be
Yeah.
able to find where your limit is.
Hmm.
And then as I understand it, two kinds of training for strength. There's training for repetition and then training to failure. So you can increase your capacity by training until you physically can't
Okay.
anymore.
Hmm.
But we can also increase our capacity by staying within our limits and then just running up reps, right?
Hmm.
And do
Anaerobic,
these have
anaerobic.
different?
Hmm.
Well, yes, but not just that for strength training.
Okay.
In addition to, yeah, anaerobic and aerobic capacity.
Okay.
Um, it's my understanding that if you stay within your limit and just push reps, your nervous system will grow, and you'll be able to better use your muscles. Like that's why rock climbers are little wiry guys, but they're so ridiculously strong, and they
Right.
don't have big muscles. And weightlifters push to their limit and rep to failure, and their muscles swell up beyond the capacity of their nervous system can command.
Hmm.
Um, so that is just to introduce the idea that that doesn't change. The nature of improvement does not change.
Okay.
What changes is where is your limit. So I did have a class on AI where we used AI in the class, and models at the time were weaker. But I can tell you this: I had to do 10 times as much work for that class with the AI agent than any other. So it
Wow.
took the same amount of time. I spent no more time on it because the AI would do the composition, but I had to do a lot more reading and understanding, and then I would grab a much larger amount of information per assignment and compose it with the AI.
So it'll be interesting to see if they change the PhD journey and the requirements for a dissertation, because I guess what you're saying is in some ways it will challenge us to think even more,
Even further, yes.
even further. Wow, that's cool.
The student will be expected to tackle more complex problems because the simple problems will become trivial, and they
Yeah,
are. Now, and this is complicated because as the ceiling rises, the floor falls out from underneath of us. When you have elementary students, middle school, high school, that are not learning basic composition and basic arithmetic and algebra, they become unable to get to the level where the AI is solving trivial tasks. If
okay.
it's not trivial for you in terms of composition, then you shouldn't rely on an AI to do it.
Hmm. Like stepping stones, right? We gotta learn the basics. It reminds me of like when I was in graduate school, I believe it was. I took behavioral statistics and they had us write out all these long formulas with pencil and figure them out for, statistical analysis. And then at the end of the class, the teacher said, okay, now you're never going to have to write them again because we have computer data analysis software packages that will, SPSS that will do it for you. But we had to learn it to understand, the logic behind it. So I'll never forget that. So,
It is funny how that works. I've had the same experience many times.
mm.
But
All
we have
right.
to learn how to do it.
So I think to wrap up, don't be scared of progress. Don't be scared of learning new things and embrace these new tools as opportunities to, just to grow. We didn't
Make
really
sure
talk
you
about,
know what progress looks like.
well, we didn't talk about the ethics. Well, we touched on ethics a bit, but I think maybe that's a whole nother
We'll
thread.
have to save it for part two. I have very strong opinions on the status of academic pedagogy right now. I work for a school, but also both my parents are teachers, and I've interfaced with curriculum all my life, and I don't think that we're getting things right in the way that education is designed. But that's a whole nother conversation. I won't take any more of your time. Thanks for having me
No,
on.
this was great. I loved it. And thank you so much for pushing us all to think more and to be open-minded to progress and to where what the future might look like. So thank you very much.